Okay, it's 1:15. We'll call this meeting for the IID Board of Directors. The date's July 9th, 2013. We'll call this meeting to order. It's 1:15. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance as Director Hanks leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Kelly, do we have any actions taken and closed to be reported out?
I don't believe so.
Board, this takes us to the approval of the agenda. You've all had the agenda for some time now and been able to review it. Do we have any amendments or changes to the agenda as it's currently presented?
Mr. Chair, I move that the agenda be approved as presented.
We have a motion from Director Galindo to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
And a second from Director Hanks. Call for the vote to approve the agenda as presented. Agenda is accepted 5-0. This takes us into the public comments section of the meeting. If anyone, members of the public, have a comment, please come to the podium.
Yes, good afternoon, directors. Daniel Fitzgerald, manager of the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone. I just wanted to come here and, as probably most of you know or have been informed through your government affairs folks, that 2 weeks ago, Assembly Bill 93 passed, which eliminates the program of the enterprise zones effective the end of this calendar year. I wanted to come and thank this board and also thank the staff, in particular, Mr. Ortega, who was very helpful in at least getting out letters of support and getting out the information in terms of that. And thank you for that. Unfortunately, it went for naught. The governor had other plans in terms of that, but again, wanted to thank the Imperial Irrigation District for continued support of the Enterprise Zone program, both when I was in Calexico and with the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone. Business is still as usual, however, through the end of the calendar year. We do have a joint meeting between both Joint Powers Authority on this Thursday the 9th at the El Centro One Stop at 9 in the morning, and anyone in the public's invited. I'm going to be kind of going over what this all means, what's going forward, a little bit about what the supposed replacement plan is for, and things like that. And of course, my office is always available for questions. And so, again, this Thursday on the 9th at the El Centro One Stop. So,
thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
well, Thursday the 11th at 9. Sorry, today's the 9th.
Lindsay Dale.
Hi, good afternoon. It's nice to be announced like that. Thank you. Lindsay Dale, Imperial County Farm Bureau. I just wanted to read a quick letter to you, and I'll provide you copies as well. In regards to concerns expressed of the QSA and the future of Imperial Valley, Michael Abadi presented the attached letter, which I'm going to present to you, and I'll also have extra copies for the public. He presented this letter to the Farm Bureau Board of Directors yesterday. In it, Mr. Abadi utilizes his past history and extensive knowledge to bring forth key issues and concerns and potential solutions to resolve vital flaws in the QSA that will impact the future of our valley and agriculture as we know it. After review and a very lengthy discussion yesterday, our Board of Directors approved support of the issues raised by Mr. Abadi. And as a board of concerned farmers and ranchers here in Imperial Valley, we request that you accept the attached letter and put forth a great effort to find solutions to the concerns expressed and move forward to resolve deficiencies within the QSA. As always, the Farm Bureau is here to help and work together to find this common grounds and resolve some of these issues. And I have copies for each of the board members and administration here. If you can pass those down, thank you so much. And I also have copies for the public on the back table if anyone's interested. On a different issue, we were very busy yesterday. Let me get my other notes here. The Farm Bureau Board of Directors also discussed at length on-farm water conservation program and contracts that are still, I believe, a work in progress for your staff. It is our opinion and request from our board that in the spirit of transparencies that these contracts be made public. As you are very well, on-farm conservation is very important and to the farming community, and equally important that the conserved water is accurately calculated and recorded. So we do ask that you consider those contracts being made public. And again, we are ready to have a discussion about that and work together with you as well. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask that the content of this letter, I know it's going to be entered, that Lindsay's comments are going to be entered in the minutes for next meeting, but I'd like to request that the document itself be included as an attachment with the minutes, please, for the record.
Gloria, if you need an electronic version, I can help you with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, not seeing any. We'll turn this over to board members' comments. This afternoon, we'll start with Director Benson.
Hope everyone had a good 4th of July. No comments.
Director Galindo.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to continue to express my grief over the loss of one of Calexico's students, the young man who fell accidentally, or for one reason or another, accidentally drowned in the canal in Calexico. And the family still grieves the fact that the body has not been recovered. And at this time, I would like to ask Mr. Kelly for an update on the community forum that may be in progress, just for the audience to know.
So Director Galindo, members of the board, my office will be coordinating a meeting with the City of Calexico, the Sheriff's Office, Border Patrol, and all the other first responders that have assisted to date in that recovery effort. And we'll announce that time and place as soon as we have it calendared.
Okay, and that will be sometime before school starts again, right?
Certainly.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director Galindo. Director Kuhn?
I would really like to acknowledge Mr. J.R. Hatfield for the work he's put in on this effort, Director Galindo. I still think he needs a little more sun. He's kind of getting a little pale back there. God, I can't believe how dark you got out there. Anyway, it is a sad time, and I know that Mr. Hatfield has put in a lot of hours, and he's been overseeing that thing since the Sunday, Father's Day, I guess, is when we got really involved. So I don't know who exactly your immediate supervisor is, but if it were me, I would certainly make a recommendation that you be Employee of the Month for June. And if I can have anything to do with that, and if I could find out who to contact, I would make that recommendation in person. I have nothing else.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Hanks?
Yeah, I have a statement I'd like to read. Questions were raised at the last board meeting regarding the engagement by the general manager of 2 outside communication firms to assist IID with the QSA litigation and the Salton Sea Renewable Initiative. Just to make sure the record is clear, I want the public to understand that these 2 firms were retained on a project basis and for a 6-month period. In the case of ABCO, the general manager believed and the board concurred that IID needed a Sacramento-based firm with extensive and wide-ranging experience in the energy and public policy arena. With the diversity firm, the focus is more localized and has mainly to do with outreach and coalition building in English and Spanish in the Imperial and Coachella Valleys. Their joint charge is to build public awareness, recognition, and ultimately acceptance of what IID is attempting to do at the Salton Sea, which is to utilize the systematic development of renewable energy assets in and around the Salton Sea as a long-term funding mechanism for restoration of the sea. I see their role as being seamlessly integrated into the QSA litigation strategy, and in fact, what qualifies both of these communication firms in my mind and what sets them apart is their experience in working with complex litigation. There is no litigation I'm aware of that is as complex as a quantification settlement agreement. For this reason, I see this outside communication function as an extension of our QSA litigation team, and I expect it to add real value in the weeks and months to come. Everyone should rest assured that if the Salton Sea is not fixed, it is our belief that the QSA will fall on its own weight. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hanks. And I don't have any comments for today. Let's move on to the General Manager. Mr. Kelly, you have some comments?
Yes, President Desert, members of the board, I'd like to acknowledge principals of the diversity consulting group who are with us today in the audience, Mr. Alex Rodriguez and former Assemblyman Pedro Nava.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Simmons, you have any comments?
I have no comments, Mr.
Thank you. This moves us to the consent area of the agenda. We have 4 items on consent. I'll read them into the record. Consent item 1 is the minutes of June 25th, 2013. Consent item number 2 is review or deny claims for damages. And there's 4 parties involved there. Consent item number 3, letter agreement with Southern California Edison regarding the transfer of certain IID electrical conductor facilities. And last consent item 4 is the report of accounts payable, checks, and wires for June 2013. Do we have a motion to accept the consent?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item number 1, please, to vote on it separately. I was not here at that meeting. And I move on the other 3.
Okay, so we have a motion from Director Glendo to accept the consent items 2, 3, and 4, and handle the consent item 1, which is the minutes from June 25th, and as a separate matter.
Make a motion. I'll second your motion.
And we have a second from Director Hanks. Call for the vote.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes. Number 1.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of June 25th and consent item 1 from Director Hanks. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And a second from Director Benson. Call for the vote. Item passes 4-1 for the individual consent item for the minutes. Items 2, 3, and 4 on the consent calendar passed 5-0. This takes us into the action area of the agenda today. Action item 5 is a clarification of the May 28th, 2013 action on hiring 14 additional patrolmen. This is located on page 46 of the agenda, and presenting today is Mike Pacheco. Mr. Pacheco.
Good afternoon, board members. Mike Pacheco, North End Division. I was back here May 28th presenting the 14 water patrolmen, and you guys voted for that, and there was going to be 7 for the South End and 7 for the North End. And at that time, these positions were 2-year contract positions, and it included the benefits. And these positions were requested to manage our lateral spills and to handle the 12 hours. Mainly they were going to be working the night shift, the swing shift, and graveyard shift. So that's where we had needed the additional help to minimize as much spill and changes during that time. And so the action request today is to reclassify these 14 additional patrolmen as full-time employees. So if you have any,
I'll make a motion to amend our past action to include this clarification.
And I will second, and I would like to say that when I brought this to this board for approval or to recommend approval, I thought this was the way it was going to be then, but it sort of got changed. But this is what I envisioned when I first brought it here. Well, this is exactly what I didn't intend them to be.
Yeah, my understanding was that they were in training to become Sanjeros too, so there was kind of an upward mobility.
well, that's what we were going to figure. You know, our workforce, as far as Sanjeros are concerned, we have a lot of Sanjeros that are
Well-aged.
Yeah. I was trying to find the word to define that, but yeah. And so eventually, these positions were going to be full-time Sanjeros.
Be careful with that word.
I'd like to add something, Mr. Chairman. I regret that this was the original. I think the original thought was very obvious, and that was to exclude these positions from the bargaining unit. No one is going to take responsibility, but it was not a gross oversight. When I requested as to why these positions were going to be on a contract basis, the answer was, well, in case we don't need them, we can let them go. Well, we can let go people if we don't need them, whether they're in the negotiating unit or not. But personally, as my commitment to organized labor I found it embarrassing to have done this to the workers that are already out there. And so I'm not expecting anyone to take responsibility. I know that when Director Kuhn brought this up, this was not his intention, and neither was Director Hank's intention to vote for this. I also personally think that the union dropped the ball on it because they did not react on this before it came. That's their deal. But in the future, let it be known that if we're going to begin to take this stand of working against the associations, then perhaps one of the places where we need to start is with administration. Put administration on contract only, that way we can let them go if we don't need them. And that way, everyone will be treated the same way. But I just want all of us to think that if it weren't for those guys out there that are working at 120 degrees every single day, and for us not to classify them as employees, it's inhuman. Thank you.
Could I ask one question?
Sure.
I've heard rumors how many people have applied for these 14 positions.
That's true.
Yeah, the HR gave us a status. There's over 1,400 applicants for these 14 positions, and so they're going through them now. They expect in 2 weeks, then the interviews will start from there.
Okay, so we have a motion from Director Hanks and a second from Director Kuhn to amend this presentation. Any further questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote. Item passes 5-0. Moving on to action item 6 is amendment number 4 to service agreement 81-1528 with David Nahai Consulting Services, located on page 47 of the agenda, and presenting today is Mr. Kevin Kelly.
Yes, President Desert, members of the board, this item appeared on your last agenda, and we pulled it until you had a full board. In the meantime, I have doubled back with Mr. Nahai, who I saw yesterday, and he's made contact, as he warranted that he would, with UCLA's Luskin Center, and the Luskin Center has indicated that it has some interest in joining with IID in a science and innovation project at the Salton Sea. Mr. Nahai is the former general manager of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. He's been of great assistance to my office over the course of the last couple of years in the public power sphere and also in our dealings with Sacramento. Yesterday, he provided an itinerary in which staff and I met with Chief of Staff to the President Pro Tem of the Senate, the Executive Director of California Air Resources Board, and most importantly, Secretary Laird of Department of Water Resources. So I would ask your board to extend Mr. Nahai's consulting agreement for another 6 months.
Board, do you have any questions?
I have a question. Just as far as he is an attorney, but he's not acting as an attorney. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And are there other clients that would be counter to our stance on public power, or is he strictly a public power person?
He's most identified with public power. I've not asked that pointed of a question.
Okay. So
he does have other clients statewide.
So he's mainly a person that sets up meetings and helps with issues related to renewables and now the Salton Sea.
Yeah, I think he's most closely identified with renewables in California and the state RPS of 33%.
All right. Board, do we have a motion to approve this service agreement?
I'll make a motion to approve it because I think he's going to be very important in our Salton Sea Renewable Initiative. I think he's going to be a key player in bringing load centers to the area, and nothing happens without a load center.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Director Hanks and a second from Director Kuhn. Further discussion?
I would just ask that there's some deliverables that he provides, whether it's updates to the board or through you about what he's doing, because he's kind of been a person working in the background.
Yeah, so he's wanted to get before your board in open session, and I've been remiss in not allowing him that forum, so I will.
Okay.
If I may add something, Mr. Kelly, I think that we've set the trend not only with the Ferguson Group but with Walco that we not only want but we expect reports as to what's going on a regular basis. Rather than ask for them, they should be bringing them to us. And I think that Mr. Nahai would stand to better the communication between us and his firm by doing this.
I think he'd agree.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, and a call for the vote. Item passes 5-0. Next up is action item 7, modify energy rewards programs related to attic insulation. Items located on page 51 of the agenda. And presenting today is Sabrina Barber.
Good afternoon, President Desert, members of the board. Sabrina Barber, Assistant Manager of the Energy Management Strategic Marketing Section. At the board's direction, staff reevaluated the program guidelines and the cost effectiveness related to attic insulation. Staff also, as an element of that reassessment, met with representatives from Summit to ascertain their perspective based on actual field conditions, and so that we could incorporate those recommendations and suggestions into the proposed program modifications. Further, staff met or presented this presentation to the ECAC at the July meeting, wherein staff received feedback during our public comment session to increase the minimum existing insulation levels beyond the R19 that is proposed in the recommendations here. So based on our reassessment and the feedback, we're proposing the following changes. just as a quick review, currently the maximum existing insulation level currently that in order to be eligible for an incentive is R11. Depending on the type of insulation installed, that's how we determine what the actual R value is the type of insulation being installed. The minimum efficiency is that in order to qualify, you need to bring up the existing insulation, assuming there is any, but up to R38, and that's currently Title 24 requirements in Climate Zone 15. And our incentive levels are 60 cents per square foot for homes that were constructed prior to 1978, and the 15 cents is for any homes constructed after that date. Based on the feedback and our reevaluation, we propose the following changes. Here, it's indicative that the maximum existing insulation be increased from R11 to R19. However, based on the public comments during the ECAC, we went back and took a look at the potential impact of increasing it beyond R19. And because the cost effectiveness is analyzed using deemed estimated savings, there really is no impact as far as cost effectiveness if we increase it above the R19, as long as it does not exceed R30. So, if the board so desires, they could increase that to maximum existing insulation levels being less than R30. And the minimum efficiency of the insulation would be the same. It would be bringing it up to current Title 24 requirements, the R38. We would eliminate the 15 cent incentive, which would eliminate the date of construction. Originally, when we had created that requirement, it was in an effort to target those structures that had no attic insulation. So we believe that we may have reached market saturation, and so we can now at this point modify the program to eliminate that requirement. That would leave just a straight 60 cents incentive regardless of the year in construction. And I just added a bullet point just to clarify that the conditioned space is based on the first floor only. So it's the incentives provided for the conditioned space of whatever the square footage is on the first floor. Here's the simulation. Did I lose? Oh, there we go. E3 simulation, it's essentially our analysis for the cost effectiveness. As you can see, assuming there's no attic insulation, bringing up the current insulation level to R38 will result in gross annual estimated savings of over $1,300. So the IID would be paying $1 per kilowatt, approximately 45 cents. And the estimated savings here are $161 per year. And the TRC level, which is our total resource cost, that's one of 5 different cost effectiveness tools and considered the industry standard for determining cost effectiveness, which must be greater than 1. It's shown here as 3.5, well, equal to or greater than 1, shown here as 3.5. Attic insulation, any existing, which would mean up to R30. So if we increased it to less than R30, we would have gross annual savings of, brings it down a bit to 400. However, as you can see, the TRC, which is a cost effectiveness tool, is still 1. So it's still deemed a cost effective program. The only concern would be the $1 per kilowatt hour that we would pay. It's considerably higher. It increases to $1.55 per kilowatt hour. And the annual savings drop considerably as well. As you can see, for the savings for the customers, 46. And this slide here just reflects detailed budget information by providing the measure allocations of the Energy Rewards Program's overall $1.6 million budget. And this is based roughly on the activity and participation rates of last year's program, with the adjustments made for measures being offered this year. As you can see, there's plenty of funds that are available to support the proposed changes for attic insulation. The lion's share of the $1.6 million is allocated specifically for attic insulation. So of the $1 million that's available, we've spent $150,000. So there's still over $800,000 available for funding of the attic insulation. Oh, that's the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer those now, but...
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm also looking at on our page 54, the budget and energy rewards in the different categories, and the allocated amounts, and I take it the second column is the percentage that's been met so far?
That's the second column, the percentage of the allocation is how much of the budget has been allocated for that particular measure. So 63% of our overall budget has been allocated specific to attic insulation.
And these categories, as well as the issue with the insulation, are being advertised through, are they in inserts in the bills that go home? Is that the only way that this information is being disseminated to the public?
We've added in the bills. We've done, we've posted on our Facebook. We've marketed at regular events, marketing events that we do throughout the year. We have flyers and information available, but the majority of the work that's being done has been, or as far as the communications, have been driven by the contractors at this point.
Okay.
And the reason that we did that.
Are there billboards too?
I'm sorry?
Are there billboards? I saw a billboard in Imperial soon.
Yeah, there's a billboard. It's not for attic insulation. It's for our summer campaign. We do that every year in order to encourage people to conserve energy during our peak periods.
I'm just wondering how effective, because I don't know too many farm workers that have Facebook, and they're really the ones in many cases the economically disadvantaged. Well, they have cell phones, I suppose. I don't know about Facebook, but the manner in which we communicate to the working and the less advantaged populations still ought to be considered by the old traditional means of radio and newspaper. And I'm not convinced that we are utilizing those means. Now, I understand from the local paper that advertising is exorbitantly expensive. I don't know that that's the case with all newspapers. I would like to think that perhaps the Spanish-speaking publications are a little more reasonable, but I think we need to explore those avenues given the fact that we have this much money. Secondly, I'd like to ask Mr. Hernandez or Mr. Gauna, who are both members of the ECAC, if they have any comments with regards to this presentation that went to your board, to your committee a couple of weeks back. Is this in line with what was presented to you, and are you in agreement?
Good afternoon, board members. John Hernandez, 514J Brawley. Yes, the ECAC was unanimous in moving forward with these recommendations as presented by Sabrina. However, on your comment, I'd like to just piggyback on your comment and looking at the percentage spent at 25%, and yet here we are in July. Again, I brought that point up too, that it appears that we need to be a little bit more aggressive in getting the word out and utilizing these funds, and maybe there's even room for increasing some of the incentives and some of the other energy rewards programs. We have Dippy Duck and water. Maybe we need a megawatt or somebody like that in power, but we do need to get the word out there. Thank you.
Thank you. And as far as the marketing efforts, we are increasing an outreach plan. We've received a number of comments from various ECAC members expressing their desire to have a door-to-door grassroots approach. So we're putting together a strategy to incorporate that, as well as some other avenues for communicating that we perhaps have not pursued. One of them also incorporating the papers, the Spanish, as well as the regular Imperial Valley Press, Desert Sun, that we regularly advertise in, but also different approaches such as using the movies. There's local postings where you can, where they tell you to turn off your cell phone. You can actually run local ads that way. So just trying different mechanisms for reaching out to the public and trying to get the word out to our customer base.
Sabrina, just
Yes,
to make
sir.
sure I'm clear, is the ECAC's recommendation to take it to a maximum level R19 and explain again, you said something about R30?
Yeah, that was the ECAC's recommendation because that was the original presentation, was increasing the maximum existing R level from 11 to 19. However, at the ECAC meeting, we did receive public comments requesting an increase, particularly 7 inches based on cellulose material. Cellulose, you have to take the 7 inches and then multiply it with a factor of 3.7 because that's related to the insulation level, and that's how we determine the R level. So we took a look at that. That would be 26.5 or 25.6, excuse me. So that would essentially be an R26 level, and when looking at that, there's no difference between an R19 and up to R30. So
I've got one last question, and I'd like to ask to internal audit, if I could.
Good afternoon. Yes, Director.
Good afternoon. I understand internal audit has a duty to audit our benefits program. Is that correct?
Yes. Particularly, we are auditing the attic insulation program, and as I communicated yesterday, while our audit is not quite finished to be presented because we have to go through the draft issue a draft report before we get the final to bring it to the board. We said that we can say with confidence that there are no reason from the audit perspective for this program not to move forward. The existing controls that they have in place are adequate, and there are any program improvement recommendations that we may have, those can be implemented easily in going forward.
Okay, so the controls would be in place, and it would meet the state requirements.
That's right. We did look at the assembly bill that covers the program, and we didn't see any issues with it, and we all believe that IID is in compliance.
I would make a motion that we go with the ECAC recommendation. Included in that would be to have your department, Sabrina, develop a grassroots level. I'm very concerned also with the percentage that we take this public benefit money and return it back to those that can use it, and it helps us all with our power bills, that's for sure. But that's my motion.
I'll second. And I would also like to add that having talked to some of the contractors who do this, they canvass whole blocks at a time to see if anybody qualifies for this. So there is an effort out there to get the word out.
And that's part of the reason that we have not aggressively marketed it, because our contractor, well, not our contractors, but the contractors have been very effective in doing their own marketing, especially based on last year's activity. We spent over $1 million, and that's how we came up with this budget allocation. So we didn't want to oversubscribe the program. However, it looks like we may have reached market saturation, which is indicative of the need to make program modifications such as recommended today.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What was the percentage that were spent last year of the 1.6 million? Is it a static 1.6 every year, or?
Last year was 1.5, but as you may recall, we added additional funds from the Public Benefits Fund balance to fund additional insulation.
So we do have a bigger balance. So we have a $20 million balance, right, of the Public Benefits Fund?
Yes.
And are we required to only spend 1.6 a year, or?
No, as long as it's cost effective, we can apply as much as necessary.
Okay, because there was that other solar program where we had to hit specific targets. This doesn't have a specific target, right?
We do have energy savings, but this is only one element of our overall energy efficiency portfolio. So currently, I mean, we have the funds available to support a program modification such as this. At some point, once the public benefits fund balance is drawn down, we will have to reassess our incentive levels, just because this is a bit more expensive when you're looking at it from the perspective of $1 per kilowatt hour. However, the funds are available, and it is an extremely popular program with a number of our customers. We've received very, very good feedback. We, as I mentioned, are using deemed estimated savings for calculating the cost effectiveness. Once we get past the actual summer period, peak period, what we intend to do is do an assessment or an analysis based on actual savings. So we'll go through the year, we'll perform the analysis, we'll normalize it based on weather patterns, but to come up with actual savings to determine if we could bring that cost of the $1 per kilowatt hour down based off actual savings rather than deemed estimated.
Okay, and then how many houses qualify under the old program and the new program? Any idea?
You'd probably be better versed to. Go ahead.
You sure? Excuse me, is there a first and a second?
Yes.
Okay, conversation now.
Go ahead, Mr.
Good morning,
Marvel.
Pilgrims. I'm Howdy Doody Rudy, 800 Kemp Court, Calexico. I'm going to give you some more information that will put smiles on your faces. Again, to review, the 7 inches of attic insulation maximum will allow about 25% homes that had cellulose insulation added in the late 80s, early 90s through the gas program and Campesinos Unidos. In going over 1,340 homes throughout the valley and some in Coachella, a lot of homes had 4.5 to 5.5 inches of cellulose. Those homes would qualify if 7 inches maximum were your benchmark.
So Rudy, how many homes again are there in inventory?
That's next.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. From the time the Imperial Valley started to 1979, there was 26,118 dwellings available here in Imperial Valley. Okay? Including the 80s and part of the 90s, that would be another 12,421 homes that could participate in this program and save money. Now, granted, I apologize to our neighbors north of us in Coachella. I'm cut short in time here, but I wasn't able to do all the numbers for Coachella, but you could just add 1.5 times more to the Coachella Valley, our service area up there. Currently, clients in this program that we've done, the 1,340, have been saving $40 to $50, $60 a month. That's every month. That's every month. Okay. Now, please understand that this savings is not just 1 month. As long as they stay in that residence, as long as they receive an IID bill for that residence, this money, this savings is perpetual. For a lot of people, it's 30, 40, 60, 70 years. So you're providing a great service to your ratepayers, and that's what they expect, by putting the money back into the market so they can take advantage of it. Granted, majority of the people that are saving money is not going to put it in their IRAs, their KEOs, their 401ks, or a savings account. Why? There's necessities, there's needs. These people can now go to the store, buy groceries. Senior citizens buy groceries and medicine. And for parents that have kids, which in our days, for some of us, we never paid for this. But now you got to pay for Little League, for soccer, for ballet, so on and so forth. So now they have some disposable income from old money to put back in their own home by allowing their kids to participate in these programs. That makes sense? Because it's real. It's not untrue. It is actually happening in the streets right now. Also understand, board members, that Imperial Valley has some of the highest respiratory illness numbers in the nation. And when a home is well insulated, especially the attic, where 40 to 60% of your cooling or heat is lost, when the attic is not well insulated, and in the summer, these kids stay inside, they're going to be healthier. But let's look at it long term. The more homes that are done, our air quality problems will start subsiding to some degree, to some extent. And the board should get credit for that, because this attic insulation does a whole lot more than just save money monthly on their energy bill. And all this is science, all right? Just this Sunday, I guess it's June 30th, IV Press, Imperial Valley's young asthma sufferers, a growing concern. Just one statistic. In 2010, the rate of asthma-related emergency room visits for children 0 to 4 years of age was 189.4 for 100,000 residents in the county. This was Imperial Valley. For the state, it was 109. A significant difference in numbers, okay? Again, this is what you guys are doing as board members to help with this problem. Also, if you haven't visited your IID website, residential rebates, get in there, go to Home Saver Energy page. A home in 1951 with 2 to 3 inches of insulation, okay, you'll remove, when you insulate this attic, you're going to remove 5,062 pounds of CO2. That equals to 0.4 of a vehicle removed off the street. So if we did 1,000 homes with this attic insulation program, you just removed 500 polluting cars off the street. Now, if you're able to do 2, 3, 4, 5,000 homes and insulating them, what do you think you can do for the air quality for Imperial Valley and its residents? And mind you, a lot of these are IID employees that call in sick because they don't feel well because they have asthma attacks. So in short, those are some of the short-term, long-term benefits. And we're hopeful that the board considers this and, supports the 7 inches, maximum installation, adding R38 on top of whatever they have. So if a house has R19 and you add R38, that's R57. The homes that we did in the past year and this year, they have R49. And the Department of Energy says from R38 to R60 is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maldonado. Any further comments or questions from the audience?
I just had one clarification, and Rudy brought it up, but it said proposed minimum efficiency of insulation is R38. That's the new added
That's
insulation.
the new added insulation. Okay. So the level
Not
to
that they only have
up,
to bring it up 3 inches or something.
Well, potentially they could, depending on what the pre-existing, they could only be bringing it up.
But they have to add the additional 7 inches or whatever the.
Right. Depending on what they're existing.
They don't just have to take it to R38. They have to take it the full.
No, they have to bring it up to R38. Once you exceed the R38 level, then the cost effectiveness does drop.
But we're paying the same. Why shouldn't we make them?
We're paying the same between R19 and R38 on the maximum existing level. Once you move from R38 to R49, it's very minimal savings beyond the R38.
I guess I'm confused. Rudy, did you say something different? That you're actually adding the additional. How many inches are you typically putting in now?
14 inches, which is R38.
So you would add an additional 14 on any new job?
On anything that's below 7 inches, we would include R38 or 14 inches on top of that. Okay. Those with R19 plus R38 would be R57.
I just don't want people to get cut short. I want people to get the full benefit. And if everyone's getting the same job done, I want to make sure it's the full number of inches on every house.
Okay, but I need to beg the question here. If you're helping clean up the air, isn't that a value added that you're bringing to the community, your ratepayers? You know, to say that anything above R38, there is no savings, well, you know, that's not correct. The science shows, and this is off your own IID website, that there is a savings.
And to provide clarification, yes, he is correct in that the societal benefits are not included in the total resource cost, which is what we use, primarily because it is so difficult to quantify. As staff on recommendations, when we bring a program forward, we bring programs based off the TRC of equaling 1 or greater. But as the local governing body, should you desire to approve a program, you can do so that is not deemed cost effective based on the TRC of 1. You can attribute societal benefits, whether it be addressing unemployment or cleaning up the environment or any of those type of benefits that are difficult to quantify. You can approve such a measure.
If we are, in fact, cleaning up there to the extent that to which Rudy speaks, then I think we should try to get some kind of credit for it somehow. I mean, air credits.
Well, we do need air credits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that came up the last meeting. I think that we were going to try and find out for you what the
I mean, if it's possible,
emissions captured would be.
If it's possible, because we can certainly use air credits. Anyway, I'm ready to vote if you guys are.
Okay.
I was just going to ask if we can amend your motion that we actually always increase it 14 inches and not just take it up to R38 as a minimum. But I just think everyone should be getting it, the full scope of insulation, the full benefit, no matter what their previous insulation was.
So,
Sabrina, is that defensible for the IID to add regardless of what the existing insulation is, to add another 14 inches?
as a local governing body, you can use the societal benefits argument in order to support it. Our third-party M&V, when it comes through and they perform the analysis, I would assume that that would be a component of their review, is to determine that. And at that point, we would probably want to take a look at efforts to quantify that number.
But I'm confused because if we're paying the full 60 cents, we should get the same for each job. So we should get the full 14 inches. We shouldn't get less. And you're saying we can get less and it's okay and the contractor doesn't have to do as much work. That doesn't equate to me. Everyone should get the same benefit. And if someone has previously more insulation, they have a bigger benefit. So what? If they want to pay for more, they can pay for more inches of insulation on top of that, I'm sure. Rudy's more than willing.
So, Betty, is that defensible for the board to take action on that if we increase it 14 inches rather than...
That's why there was a different standard before of less money because they didn't need as much.
As far as defensible, it's probably better be a legal question because it's the bill, how the bill sounds. So while I didn't look into the what you can or cannot do is, public benefits fund, we have to, they're not much, but there's just certain limitation the way you can spend it, my understanding. But I think Mr. Simmons would be more than happy to answer to your questions after he looks at it. I think it's illegal. It's a bill, so I don't know.
If I may, I believe there's a formula, and once you go past that formula, you're not doing anything.
You're not getting any benefits once you...
Paying the same amount.
But you're not doing anything, and then I think we have a little. We could well be on that gray area of being able to. I understand.
Defend
you want a complete basket of apples for the amount of money a basket of apples costs, but I'm just thinking that in this public benefits thing, there's a formula that drives what they get, and if you go past that, I think you're just.
And as a requirement of the Public Benefits Fund, as California Public Utility Code Section 385, the requirement is that it has to be cost effective. So, I mean, the straightforward, simple answer is to, keep it right at R38, and then you alleviate any of those concerns. Yeah. But I do want to indicate that, there are options to bring it below the 1 based on societal benefits. Now, if you're talking millions of dollars for the kilowatt hour, as it stands, we're looking at, over $1 per kilowatt hour. At some point, you may say.
But you have later in the presentation another proposed tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 pump. Does it have the same benefits as this?
Tier 3 for the air conditioning, it's comparable.
As which?
As the energy savings are actually, in fact, let me go back to the presentation.
Do they all hit the same criteria, or is everything on that list better?
They're all evaluated based using the total resource cost, and that's
which we're hitting no matter what. So.
Right. The only exception that we would have, no, actually, even in our LEAP program, where we bear 100% of the cost, it meets the TRC of 1.
Director Benton, I kind of understand what you're saying, but my second was predicated on the fact that this went before the ECAC. I mean, it was all approved by them.
That's fine. I only feel like I'm making the program better, not worse.
I understand that.
Yeah. When it's not costing the IID anymore.
I understand that too.
And I think the contractor's willing to put in the full amount of insulation, but.
And once we do our post inspections, which the third-party evaluator will also do post inspections, they'll see that the ending R value is higher than the R38 and even the R49, and the savings drop. So we have to claim based on what's actually installed.
Mr. Grand, do you have a comment?
I have a question. As a consumer, I'm taking this as an incentive. I think the insulation is more than 60 cents a square foot to install, isn't it? And so if you're going to require somebody to put 14 inches of insulation in,
I don't know.
14 inches of insulation in to get the credit, and it costs me more to put 14 inches in rather than 7 where I would make the cut before, then that would hurt me as a consumer, right? I'm just trying to understand what we're trying to get to here, because I think this is an incentive. You're not paying for the full amount of insulation. If you're getting 14 inches, the IID is going to pay for my insulation to be put in. I'll sign up tomorrow. But, I think there's a difference between what you're giving as an incentive and the cost to the consumer.
Right. We're getting to a point where we may be putting in so much insulation that we're going to increase the cost to the consumer.
That's what I'm getting.
And I think Mr. Guzman's going to address that. They believe they're purchasing this insulation wholesale and installing this. Do you anticipate this increase in the insulation that we're going to be allowing to be installed to cost the consumer more?
14 inches of insulation over on top of whatever it has up to 7 inches.
And right now, the way the process works, if I'm familiar with it, there's a $35 processing fee, and for an average home, say 1,500 square feet, that's the total cost.
That's the total cost, $35.
And if we increase the amount of insulation as we're contemplating today, will there be an additional fee above and beyond the $35, or will it still be covered?
That's it. It's all covered. You get over 14 inches over what you have there. And now, as far as the numbers where Sabrina is talking about, I don't know what weather did they figure those numbers on of savings. But this is 120 degrees. I'm sure they didn't have those kind of degrees wherever they figure those numbers at. So I think it's more savings here by having more insulation. It's only fair. You got an umbrella over your head here. It's cooler, right? You got a degree better. Couple of degrees better.
Well, very good. Thank you, Mr. Guzman.
You're welcome.
We have a motion from Director Hanks and a second from Director Kuhn to approve and modify the Energy Rewards Attic Insulation Program, as has been thoroughly discussed today.
Come on, those good minutes.
Carl, call for the vote. Item passes 5-0. Moving on to action item 8, acknowledge receipt of financial report for May 31st, 2013, page 55 of the agenda, and presenting today is Mr. Greg Broking.
I'm on page 57 of the board package, looking down at line 15, column B, for the Energy Department, the budget net income through May was roughly $31 million of net loss of $31 million. So what's actually happened through May year to date, you move over one column to line 15, column C, it's about $24.5 million a net loss. So it's a favorable variance, which is line D of column D of line 15 of $6.3 million. Now, if I could jump back to column C, where it shows the net loss of $24 million. When we prepare our financial statements, we do it in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So we include both cash and non-cash items, which is different than when we budget. We budget based on a cash basis. So if you look at line 12, column C, depreciation is a non-cash item. So that more than offsets the loss we have through May. So what, from a cash basis, and there are timing differences involved in this, but what this is, financial statements are saying on a cash basis is we were able to pay all our expenses and still have $2 million left over before capital. So right now, we think we're right on target for our coverage ratio, debt coverage ratio of 1.45. That's lower than we have in prior years, but we haven't budgeted any rate stabilization money this year. We're planning on budgeting it in the next 3 years. I expect that coverage to go up next year. So from my point of view, right now, if things go according to plan, it's just kind of an aberration. It's a little below normal, but we expect to turn it around in the following years. So that's been communicated to several of the rating agencies already. So they're not going to be too concerned, hopefully, with just 1 year of that coverage being as low as it is, because they're expecting it to go up, and we'll be meeting with them and showing them the forecast in future years that show that coverage is going up. And then if I could move to page 60, which is the water income statement. 17, column B, the year-to-date budget. So small I can hardly read it. I think it's
2.5.
15.
Oh, that one.
No, 15 or $16 million net income. Year-to-date is higher than that. It's about 18 million. I guess it's about 15.4 million. Year-to-date. Actual, it's a little over 18 million. It's a favorable variance of 2.6 million. This is all on page 60, line 17, columns B, C, and D. The water department has no long-term debt, so there's no coverage requirement. We paid off all the remaining long-term debt last year, and the next borrowing will probably be for the water transfer whenever those projects are approved.
That's for the system conservation?
Conservation, yes. And then I want to talk about cash for just a little bit for energy and water. So moving over to page 69, which is Energy Department cash. Line 11, column C, into December, we had $87 million of unrestricted cash. That has dropped down to $75 million at end of May. Although we're projecting it to be at the end of December, roughly 131 or $132 million. Now, there's a couple things that will happen that will allow that increase to occur. We do have a borrowing plan this year for the Energy Department, so we expect to reimburse ourselves for past capital expenditures, and when we do that, that will increase our unrestricted cash. And then there's timing issues involved of how the department generates revenue during the year. Obviously, the summer months are the big generators of revenue for us. We haven't really hit those yet, so and there's a time lag too. We incur the increased power supply expenses before we receive the revenue for that. So those two reasons are the two main reasons why we expect to be around $130 million unrestricted cash at the end of the year.
Make a motion to acknowledge the financial report.
I'll second that, and I have a question for you, Greg.
Okay.
In looking at the depreciation on page 57, we are not currently covering depreciation costs, which when I went to business school, you're supposed to at least cover depreciation because then you save money for future expenditures as you rebuild the building, the generators, the equipment. So would your recommendation be going forward that we get to a level where we're zeroing out at the end of every year?
At some point, I think we do need to start recovering most, if not all, of the depreciation.
Okay.
But I think that could be accomplished over a period of years.
Because effectively now we're just doing short-term borrowing to fill the holes, right?
Well, not short-term, but
well, it's short-term and then it rolls to long-term.
Long-term, yeah.
Okay. So our rate structure is in a way broken in the sense that we're not recovering enough on the power side to pay for the capital expenses of our electrical system.
Well, I wouldn't say it's broken. I agree with your last part that we're not recovering all of our capital expenditures through rates, and I'm not sure, or through cash or reserves, and I don't think we should. There has to be a certain amount of borrowing because it's a capital-intensive industry. You're building projects that'll last 30 years, so it's kind of hard to ask current ratepayers to pay for projects that will benefit people for 30 years. So there's just has to be a balance between the two.
Okay, but you should at least have some debt service component in there, where
yes.
Right.
Okay, Board, we have a motion from Director Hanks and a second from Director Benson to acknowledge the receipt of the attached financial reports as presented by the Financial Department. Any further questions? Call for the vote. Item passes 5-0. This takes us into the information section of the agenda. Information item 9 is to discuss reactivization of the former IID dive team. Page 83 of your agenda, and presenting today will be Director Kuhn.
Well, I would like to say I'm glad that I didn't ask him to be here, but I'm glad J.R. Hatfield is in attendance because I went down on the All-American myself, and I've actually went down at my own expense and driven it about 4 or 5 times also. Anyway, I did not realize we had a dive team in the past. And when it was brought to my attention that we did, then I thought it perhaps would be advantageous for it to put it back together. I understand the reasons why it fell apart, and it's truly sad that it had to go because we had person or persons who made it necessary. But I think it could be, we have the equipment. We still have it. I don't know whether it can be certified, but we still have it. We would have to get training to certify people. That's a given. I would only ask, that we restart the program, and I would certainly like to do that with the as a request for me. I'd like to see Mr. Hatfield headed up. I really would. He's just been exemplary out there, and I think he would do good at this if we so choose to do it. And again, I just, as one, would like to see it brought back.
Mr. DeVoy?
Dan DeVoy, Manager, Human Resources and Loss Control. We certainly could either take direction from your board to do so, or we could revisit it and come back with a recommendation to your board, maybe in August, and take a look at all the issues. It was previously overseen by our safety function. So my initial thoughts would be probably that's where we'd put it back, but we could, JR is part of our group, so we could all sit down and kind of flesh it out amongst ourselves and come back with a recommendation to your board.
This is on the information agenda, so it needs to come back, and I think the board needs to have time to think about it and digest it. And certainly there's some groundwork that needs to be done out on staff side.
It was a volunteer program before, and we've got the infrastructure in place to revitalize it if that's the direction. But we could certainly talk about it amongst ourselves and have staff come back with a recommendation.
How many years ago, Dan, was it that we had a dive team?
It was about 5 years ago that we dissolved it, basically.
Dissolved it 5 years ago?
Yeah.
And you said it was a volunteer program, so our employees volunteered to do this?
Yes. Victor probably could tell you how many people were actually volunteered to be part of the dive team. But we would fund their certification, and part of it was they had to spend a certain amount of time in the water on a regular basis to maintain their certifications.
And was there a previous budget or value associated with these things?
Bottom line, it's dangerous in the water. And bottom line, it was, there was a time when the sheriff's office would come out every time there's a vehicle in a canal, and they had a policy change, and they said, we'll only come out if there's a body to be recovered. If there's just a vehicle, we're not coming. So, and that's really not what our dive team did anyway. So we outsourced that and hired a company that has swiftwater divers, and they'd come out to help remove vehicles. But and then we outsourced some of the maintenance work around the drops. We'd have to do a little bit of study to see, what kind of money could we save and get our arms around some of the data. But we could come back with a recommendation.
I imagine there'd be an added insurance expense here.
Well, it's covered under workers' comp, but there's the potential. There's the potential for costs relative to people getting injured doing that kind of work.
And the Sheriff's Department is still providing a dive service?
They do, but it's for body recovery, as far as I know. Carrie can.
Just the recovery of bodies that's all that they're going to do.
And do you have any idea how much we've spent on the O&M type work?
I don't. That's part of what we'd have to kind of look into to see what kind of impact it has had.
We have used them before out at the drops to look at blades, to look at structures, do non-destructive testing on structures and stuff like that. So they've served us, and I think they've served the water department on various check structures. So
this is the Sheriff's Department did, or the IID dive team?
Oh, the IID dive team.
IID dive team previously.
More of a maintenance function.
Yeah, we've used it for a lot of maintenance.
My name's Victor Figueroa. I was part of the dive team. I'm the safety officer for them and also the manager. We have all the equipment. We do a lot of work. We save district a lot of money because we do all the maintenance underwater. As far as insurance, we all carry DAN insurance, which is part of the diving insurance. We all go through a very strict safety deal. We don't allow them to dive at certain times and everything like this. Training-wise, we train with the Sheriff's Department. They were training us the correct way to dive, certain different items. They were going to train us how to recover vehicles. This is one of the deals we made with them between ourselves so that we wouldn't have to hire outside sources to recover vehicles. We can't recover bodies, but we could do the vehicles. And they're willing to work with us. I've talked to them already, work with us again. all as a team. Them and, excuse me, I get nervous in front of people.
Not
with
front of
them,
fish?
in front of them, with them and with Borstar as a group effort together. And Borstar is a dive team from the Border Patrol. We also have in our equipment, and we used it during this the drowning incident. We have a remote control vehicle, underwater vehicle, camera, and we used ours because the people they hired just kept breaking down. So we ended up using ours, which worked really nice. And we do have also the sealed helmets with the communication systems and all. But like they mentioned, we would need the training, retrain again on all this equipment and everything. So.
Victor, do you have areas where you're limited as far as access?
We do it on a how is it, piece by piece situation. Like Carl had said, we do turbine blades. We've actually gone in, and there's some spaces that we won't go into, that we're aware of. That if it's too hazardous, and myself being a diver, and also the safety officer, I will not let people go in. Strictly refuse it if I feel it's unsafe.
How many grocery carts did you find down in those culverts?
Yeah, and we get about $5.50 per grocery cart we bring up. No.
All at 111.
It's just like, for instance, in the All-American, we know there's a lot of grocery carts. We know there's a lot. And that's why during this incident, for example, I didn't allow divers to go in. I know they got mad, but I know that All-American is very strong, very swift. There's fishing lines, you name it, there's stuff down there. And it's not, we don't want to risk people's lives over something like that. So yeah, we do, there's certain areas where we won't go in, but there's areas where we do. And as far as search goes, years back, they had a dive team from San Diego come look for a tailgate that fell down at the drop 4, I think it was. And nobody could find it. Our team, with the training we had, we searched for it and we found it.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeVoy, whenever a vehicle goes into the canal, the IID hires a company to retrieve the vehicle. That becomes our responsibility, right?
Yes, ma'am. Sometimes they're out before we get there, but
okay. But assuming that we do that, it has to be retrieved, and it's our responsibility, and then we absorb the cost, at least the initial cost.
Yes.
So that might be a base amount to start with.
Certainly.
How much we're doing on a yearly basis. That's one. Whenever a body is discovered, and this happens certainly by drop 4 a lot more often than not. Is then the Border Patrol team called in to retrieve the body, or is it the Sheriff's Department?
I think it's the Sheriff's.
The Sheriff Department.
The Sheriff's Department?
Yes.
And then who absorbs that cost?
The county.
The county does. Okay. I think that it certainly behooves us to do what we can. And yes, money is always an issue, but by the same token, as Director Kuhn would say, who puts the price on a life, number one. Number two, we've already got the willing personnel, we've got the trained personnel, we've got the experience, we've done it before. Bring it home. Bring it home.
Okay, we can do some quick study and bring back a recommendation to your board.
Thank you. Now, you're going to volunteer, right?
When I lose about 20 pounds.
Thank you, Mr. Figueroa. I really appreciate your comments and your dedication.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Next up is information item 10, discussion of seepage recovery on IID canal systems, page 84 of the agenda.
Bruce.
And Mr. Director Kuhn's presenting here also.
Okay, I just, in institutional knowledge, flashback, before there was, simultaneously when we were talking about ways to recover water for the QSA and when we were first talking about lining the All-American, I mean, before, it is lined now, but this was before. We were entertaining the thought of placing well pods along the old canal. And pumping water into the canal as a way to augment any shortages we may have. It was a viable option. And as this came to me, I feel like Saul, I had a big dream, but anyway, probably
Who had a big dream?
King Saul.
Oh.
Anyways, probably maybe 3 beers, but it wasn't a dream. But anyway, if it was viable then, it should well be viable now. And I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, nor should we. But if it's viable, if it's feasible, and if we can, then this valley should not face a shortage of water, because we could recover seepage, put it back into the canal, or use that amount of water we need to meet our goals or our needs here in the valley. And then on the years we underrun, we could inject. That makes it conserved water, and then we get to keep it for those years we do need it. And I believe that we should go forward and actively try to get this done. We could do them on the East High Line. We could do them on the West Side Main. And every gallon we put back, every acre foot we put back in there is an acre foot we bring home, and it's an acre foot we could recharge at a later date on an underused year, and then it counts as conserved water, and by God, we would get credit for it. And I think we need to do that, and I believe we should go forward with that in mind.
I have a question to water staff, but we have installed seepage recovery systems, correct? And how much annually are we recovering?
It's in the low tens of thousands of acre feet along, for instance, the East High Line, the upper reaches, and from about East High Line to about the Allison check area.
And that's fine, except my suggestion is we draw it down and then recharge it on our underuse. Therefore, we can use what we need when we need it and put it back when we don't. So not just the regular seepage. I'm talking about an effort to get the water we need and then put it back on the underuse.
So drill groundwater wells.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because right now, as we speak, even with those seepage recovery on the East High Line, we've got fields out there that are starting to show up bad where it's subbing up.
Well, we're essentially just installing tile lines, right? At what depth? Do you have any idea?
It depends in the area and the soils, but they'll go 10, 15 feet. I mean, these are fairly large canals, fairly deep groundwater.
And they're running full bore the whole time?
We have locations where we have 2-level cycle pumps, so depending on which pump and which level. And the time of the year also, we're running a lot of water, backing up a lot of water.
The higher the
backwater elevation is.
Larry, I don't want you to take this as patronizing, but your dad was a fan of this too. And we talked about it at length, and that was before the lining. So if we could do it for the lining, we could do it now, and again, it would become then conserved water that we could put back on underuse. That's the big thing here. We could get credit for it, and we would never be short of, if the river dried up, I guess we could, but I mean, we should be able to put off that event for a long, long time.
Carlos, did we have identified wells such as this that we're already utilizing as seepage recovery?
There's really 2 facets to this. One is to tap the existing seepage along canals, which we have identified.
And we're doing that.
Some drainage review as part of the system conservation program. We've also had additional review of East Highline seepage that Mr. Peschel had been looking at if we lined it, for instance, to minimize or eliminate seepage along the East High Line. But there's also the issue of you want to make sure that you're hydraulically disconnected in case you want to do some storage so that you don't continuously lose water when you store or induce seepage.
Well, I'm sure you don't want to do that.
There's a balance between seepage recovery and having an isolated groundwater storage area.
Yeah.
Which you lose some storage anyway, gradually.
Well, Carlos, I see Mr. Brooks is in the audience. I know he's done some work on some underground water storage and identifying those potential projects in the Imperial Valley and the surrounding areas. And perhaps we could bring this back to the board and take a look at what we are actually doing on seepage recovery through tile lines or through parallel lines to our canals, identify potential wells or sites, as Director Kuhn has mentioned above. As Mr. Rod Williams is in the audience. I know in the past he's recommended that we take a hard look at our seepage recovery opportunities south of Interstate 8 over on the way towards Algodones, Mexico. And I think we need to bring that back as a consolidated effort so we can all take a look at it, and not only take a look at it for opportunities, but reflect what those actual recovered numbers are at this time. I think it's upwards of 30,000 acre feet or more, but with the new board being on here, and even the old board members would need to have those numbers presented in front of them. So I'll be meeting with you and Director Kuhn, and we'll get together and see if we can centralize some type of a presentation to bring that back for further discussion.
Well, I think it's important that everybody know here that when the All-American Canal was lined, those farmers on the south side of Mexico, I mean, that is some candy dirt too, and they're still pumping and they're not re-injecting. But I'm just telling you that there's water there.
Yeah.
And it's water we could utilize, and we could put ours back.
Right. They were concerned they were going to lose that water, but they in fact
that's why we lined it.
to.
They said it was a natural aquifer.
Right.
Right.
Mrs. Kuhn, that chased us for about 4 years. We have known areas where there's aquifers where we can store water. I'm just, for clarity, are you talking about seepage or are you talking about groundwater?
I'm talking about groundwater that we can replenish, and then it becomes conserved water.
Okay, because a lot of that
seepage, you're going to make it leak, like he said. You're just recovering your own water.
Seepage water we have control over, but groundwater is a county.
I understand that,
okay.
And I'm not suggesting that they're not.
And some of the groundwater, like these two gentlemen over here I met with, has storage capacity. And ironically, when I brought this up, I had staff swear to me there was no water out there, and you and I know there's water out there, a lot of water out there. And matter of fact, I went out to some wells out there and watched them pump. But we do have some areas, and staff really needs to get with Mr. Kuhn and get him up to speed on all the work that we've done the last 2 or 3 years in locating the aquifers and.
Well, again, an important part of what I'm saying here is we can recharge when we're in our underuse.
Absolutely, that's why we did it.
And I just think that's just the way to go.
We've done that work. We've even calculated the age of some of the water out there.
There you go.
So,
and I think it's doable.
There's information. I'm glad you're there because that's some of the things that we've been working on.
Yeah.
There's no need for us ever to have an underrun without putting it in the ground for storage. Therefore, there should never be an overrun.
Exactly. And I'm just.
I have a question to Carlos. We had a staff report right when we came on the board in December, and this report in here was dated September 5th, 2012. So it was, this was done almost a year ago. But they had ranked, out of the 4 sites, they had ranked East Mesa's southeast portion the highest as far as the scoring on page 89. Was anything done after this report? Or is anyone continuing the work?
No, this is a summary of review of available information without going out to the field and exactly doing more wellbore testing, field testing. So based on various studies by various agencies and companies, this is some of the recommendations that were made, including prioritizing sites, and also made next step recommendations in this study.
There has been some further due diligence work that's been done, but we would still have to go to the expense and obtain the board's approval to prove up the capacity at alternate sites.
Well, under the circumstances, it's time.
Yeah, I would ask staff that they put a plan together and bring it back to the board and run it through the WCAB to talk about groundwater storage sites. And we've talked about it. It's been a year since this report came to us. So I think it's time that we start moving that forward again.
We'll follow up and come back with some options.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Kelly, we probably should follow up with that in our MOU with the county too.
Yeah, I think we'll probably have to agendize it and closed as well.
Mr. Reynolds.
And, I'm sorry, just for clarification, I'm not trying to do an end run around the county. I know that they're going to have to participate in this, but I see this as win-win because we can recharge it. We're not just taking it and raping the thing. We'll put it back. How's this? On the underrun years, the wells are silent.
It's actually very timely. Unlike the you're referencing when the county and IID were sort of at loggerheads over that resource. I think today,
actually, that loggerhead was before I was on. Just before I was on board. That was Lloyd Allen and Ralph Menville and those boys were. Right. But when I came on, we were it was more about lining the All-American, and then it was a new deal.
Right.
Okay. But yes, there was some friction.
Mr. Reynolds?
Hi, Rod Williams. I'm great to hear this thing being finally surfaced. Anybody that wants to take a little drive can become very knowledgeable about the entire situation. You know, the Bureau, at first of the year, December, I read, and I've seen their rig. They have a really nice new truck with a drilling rig on it that's running daily, and they bought about, I don't know, $4 or $5 million worth of casing, and that thing's running all over the place in the Yuma area, trying to recover groundwater and seepage water. But basically, the law of the river, from what we understand, you go a half mile either direction of any of the main canals, and anything you recover there is considered as reclaimed seepage water, and you'll get full credit for that. When you get outside of that area, then you're dealing with groundwater development, or if you classify a storage area, that puts another spin on it, I think, doesn't it? And Mr. Brock's property, we've all done studies on it. The East Mesa is ripe for both groundwater development. Jim spent close to $500,000 in the last 6 months. We're redeveloping that ground, connecting the wells that are there. We've had the pumps out. One of the pumps currently out. We had it sonar jetted. We're putting everything on that property in top condition, very close to finishing the project. It's roughly 1.5 miles to the Coachella, 2.5 to 3 miles to the All-American. You've already got an opening under the interstate that would dump it back into the All-American that was part of the old Brock Research Farm that's not being used, that has the capability to put it all back into the All-American if you wanted to go that direction. So there's a couple of options there. There's some real viable options in the area. If you don't really need to focus on strictly the East High Line, the West Side Main, or those are all projects that are highly needed. I mean, anybody that goes, there's farm close to the East High Line, West Side Main, All-American where it's unlined, there's ground that's got water coming up that's percolating to the top of the ground that you can't farm along some of that. And I know you've spent millions of dollars over the years to fight that problem, and you haven't got credit for any of that water, very little of it. So, as the Bureau's leading the field, I wouldn't think they'd have any conflict of interest here, because as I understand, when you release the water from the Imperial Dam in that area, from there on, it's counted toward what you're using. And you've got the entire area after it comes out of that checkpoint where it's measured, that all that seepage water is going down across into the Kashan Reservation. They've got several thousand acres. I took Vince over there and drove him around 3 years ago, spent a day with him and showed him a lot of areas there that they can't farm because the percolation of the water is coming up. I attended the big meeting that they had in Yuma when, because they're having some state issues with trying to transfer water, and they're afraid they're going to lose that water. And, they're on board over there. They understand that that there's a tremendous amount of volume of groundwater that they're fighting daily to be able to farm the whole Yuma Valley. This valley's got a lot of areas like that. We know for a fact, we've had all the testing done, money's been spent. We know where the water came from, the dating of the water. It's all been tritium dated off of Mr. Brock's property. I would think that this board and this organization, after as long and hard as Jim's worked and the people in this area have tried to face these serious problems, that they would at least take the time to sit down with him and look at his property as maybe using it for a straw to create both storage, and he's got some of the very best groundwater quality there is that I've ever seen. It's very, very close to the quality. In fact, I think it's better quality than what's in the All-American, because I know my daughter is a doctor over at nurse practitioner in Yuma, and they've had several people that they've had to restrict times from going into the All-American or into the Colorado River because of bacterial infections that are coming out of that river. So you don't have that in groundwater. We are all sitting on top of the biggest resource in the continental United States in Imperial County for groundwater. We're working on a simultaneous project right now, Jim and I are, that involves a very state-of-the-art RO system. I was in conversation this morning with people in New York that want to invest in the RO system. We've already got it up. It's runnable. And we're going to prove ourselves what the actual cost to RO water is, to RO groundwater in the Imperial Valley. Because we've sat here for 5 years and tried to work with the board and progress this problem and to be able to try to get you folks to buy into the program without having any dialogue whatsoever. So we just kind of got on an island and we're just doing what we can. Because once you get the numbers on the clear cost of RO water, and there's 3 different areas you have to look at. One is blending the water with Colorado River water. What would it do to this area and to the IID if you could utilize 50% groundwater and 50% Colorado River water and farm with that? You know what the value of the water is. The value of water today is going to be based the next 10 years off of what the Poseidon deal is in San Diego, because that's your end user. It's $2,400 a square foot. I've been up there. I've sat at their board meetings. I've listened to them. And they're passing those things. So there's a huge variance between 500 to 600 and 2,400 that may be 10, 15, 20 years from now. Mm-hmm. But those of you that have the vision and the understanding and know that you've got 20-some million people over there that are going to have water, whether you allow them to have it or not, they have the votes, and eventually the votes count at the federal level. So I'm more than happy to work with you. I've never asked you for anything, any support, other than the fact that I did ask Jim and some of the other board members to venture out and look, and they've drank the water that can feed the valley.
What's wrong with?
Okay, thank you.
But I'm not going to go out there with you when it's 121 degrees in the shade.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
We've heard this over and over. And what's ironic about it is when we first brought up, there's those of us that live in the area, hunted out there, grandparents helped build the All-American. Ooh, yes. They know about the water that's out there.
and to have some of the old staff tell me there's no water out there. When I walk out with this gentleman here and he fires up a pump running a half-mile overhead sprinklers, somebody got it wrong. But we have paid to have some tests. We have knowledge where the aquifers are at, both east and west, and it's time to look at it. But it's also time. I know Mr. Kelly was looking at it. We've been tied up on other things. There's high water areas in Imperial Valley with salty water, but there's some value to that. It's always been a liability and caused a lot of problems for farmers, but at some point in time, that water's going to be valuable, and we need to run some tests on it and see exactly where we're at.
But it's less saltier than the stuff going to the sea.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Okay, moving on information items here to information item 11, Colorado River Resource General Matters, page 92 of the agenda, and Tina Shields presenting today.
Hi, Tina Shields. I just wanted to go through a couple updates on some of the water accounting issues and some letter exchanges we've had to keep you all up to speed, and if you have any questions, respond to them. Each year the Bureau does its annual decree accounting. It publishes it in May of the following year. So earlier this year, the Bureau did finalize the 2012 accounting. At the bottom of this slide is a copy of the link to the Bureau website where you can access all of those accounting websites. But this is their end of year final numbers for IID for last year. You'll see, I know it's hard to see in this small spreadsheet, and I don't know how to operate this, but in the third column over, it's titled efficiency. You had asked about the pump yields from last year. If you total that up, it's 31,888 acre feet. I think that's pretty much the main canal seepage interception pump that you
So those are the ones
earlier.
we're getting credit for, Tina, the 31,880?
Right, and those are kind of lateral interceptors. The water is collects in the drain, and when it reaches a certain level, the pump turns on and pumps it up back into the East High Line. And I think there's one or two.
31,888 feet, acre feet is being used for water, San Diego water transfer purposes?
It's being used to,
21 is for Coachella.
yeah, it's for Coachella this year. So that's just the final numbers on that. You'll see here that we've got the final overrun accounting, which is 149,000 acre feet, and then that's reduced by excess conservation from last year and takes that number down. So a little easier version as far as overrun and underrun. I did finalize these numbers. They're in the ballpark of what we talked about before, and you can see again collectively how we accumulate the underuse, but the overruns, we end up in a payback situation. So this is just a more concise, accurate update of this graph you all have seen before. This is probably the easiest way to get a handle on the magnitude of the numbers, and maybe will help answer some of the other questions I hear circulating about available supplies and overruns. But this is just a bar graph summary of the different conservation and transfer obligations since the QSA was implemented. We don't have the All-American Canal in here. We don't have the MET 1 program. But you can see the ramping up that occurred particularly in 2012. And just keep this in mind. I'll pop back to this in a minute in a supplemental graph that isn't in your board agenda. I keep getting asked the question, why are our sales reduced from last year, but our overrun is still higher? And how does that work? One of the issues we have to keep in mind is if we compare to last year, you're assuming all things are equal, but the way the transfer was structured is there's a ramping up period in the implementation of the conservation programs. Add on top of that the payback obligations, and you start to see apples and oranges comparisons. So if we compare to last year, our delivered to users may be significantly less, but our available supply in this calendar year is reduced because we do have these additional transfer obligations. So I've lined up the last 3 years side by side so you can see the variances. You start off at the 3.1 million acre feet, and then we've just tracked our different conservation programs and deductions. So you just go down the row. What you can see has dramatically changed in the last 3 years is in 2011, we didn't have any mitigation water created for the Salton Sea because of the early delivery in 2010. In 2012, we had a half year's water. And then in 2013, we're back on the regular schedule with just 70,000 acre feet. So that's a significant difference between 2011 and 2013. You also go down and see we have our first payback obligation due in 2013, and that's 55,710 acre feet. So you can see how in that purple row, I've got, this is just a ballpark, but the available supply between this year and last year, there's about 120,000 acre feet less available supply, and that correlates directly to the increase in the conservation programs.
So the amount of farmable acres has gone down as well, right?
Areas being farmed versus total areas available for farming. So yes, the farming acreage has gone down because the fallowing program has ramped up.
So Tina, what we're answering here is working towards answering here is some comments that we're receiving that our water orders are some 200,000 acre feet less than we were.
Yeah, we have an operational report that folks see that shows a comparison of deliveries from this year to last year.
So our deliveries are less than last year, yet we're showing an overrun.
Correct. So it's, again, comparing apples to oranges and understanding what you're comparing. So I've added in the 2013 just, again, to show scale. 2012 was really big on the last graph, but if you add in 2013, you can see the ramping up because of the overrun payback is dramatically increasing. So at the end of the day, you start off with 3.1 million acre feet every year, and all these deductions have to come off, so you have less supply available in Valley. But you do have additional participants in the fallowing and conservation programs that, in theory, reduce your demand by a like amount.
So, Tina, back to that 200,000 acre feet number. What would help explain that is the fact that we're paying back over 55,000 acre feet of overrun.
Correct.
And we're fallowing more ground because
the Salton Sea mitigation obligation has increased between this year and last year.
So that's going to be 70,000 acre feet?
Correct.
Plus 55,000 acre feet of overrun payback.
Correct. Plus your ramp up in your transfer obligations. So Coachella's ramped up 5,000 acre feet from the prior year, and San Diego is now stagnant at 100,000 acre feet for the next 5 years.
So that adds up to my mind up to 140,000 acre feet. But what the comments that I'm hearing is saying that we're showing that we're 200,000 acre feet under.
So
that's the sales or delivered to users. So we're not comparing apples to apples when we use that comparison. We have to compare on the way the Bureau measures an overrun is to your approved order.
Tina, you mentioned apples and oranges, and you're going 100 mile an hour. All the growers I talk to, they want to see 3.1, how much comes off of the All-American lining, how much is transferred to San Diego, right on down the line so they can keep up with it. They want it side by side.
It's right here. That's what this graph is meant to be.
That doesn't tell it.
Yeah, it does.
That's not what they're talking about.
Tina, I have a question, and I don't know if this can be restructured, but it'd be nice to have everything that's static at the top line, and then below and then what the number is year over year should be the same, and then the acreage is next to those categories, because you have so many acres fallowed and how much water was used to come up with more of a per acre. Because when we're getting into allocation, it's nice to think of it in a per acre foot per acre.
Sure, we can add that in. So it's been a little wild the last couple years because of the deviation from the schedule for the Salton Sea mitigation because of that issue, and then also because of the catch-up on the 2011-12 San Diego. Some of that water rolled forward, you can see, in 2012.
But a lot of those are one-for-one fallowing, so that you should have acres going out and water going out with it.
Right, but the fallowing programs vary.
Right.
year to year.
I think what would be helpful, you have a set of numbers and the water master has a set of numbers. You really need to sit down and put that in a format, so when you're talking about apples or you're talking about oranges, they can see them side by side.
Right, but operational numbers are very different from accounting, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make here.
And we want to see them. It doesn't. You can show this to us all day, and it doesn't talk about, okay, how much water sales, where are the spills. Okay, we sold 200,000 acre feet less than last year. And to a grower, if we sold 200,000 acre feet last year, why are we in a projected overrun? They need to see it side by side.
Tina, you know, when we become comfortable in our role, in our job, it's easier for us to understand what we see every day. But we have people out here, you know, I mean, and I'm not saying they're not educated. That's just in layman terms, you know, what we know and what we see on a day-to-day basis, because we live it and breathe it, they don't. And so it's confusing. And I'm not suggesting that this doesn't make sense. It does. Just that when we're out there and getting these calls and getting beat up in these restaurants, they're not looking at this.
So there was a graph in a previous slide deck, and we used it. We used it as part of the apportionment workshops, but it was a representation on one slide of all of our water commitments in 2013. You remember that?
It's not an accounting slide. It's a categories of use slide.
Right, but it would speak to at least the difference in baseline between 2013 and 2012, which is what we're being measured against, right?
I have to look and see.
So
I don't know.
I think that it could go some distance in reconciling because what she's describing is a difference in baseline.
I understand that.
Right.
I think you have a gentleman behind you who's gonna give you his perspective.
Farmer Brawley. Tina, this does help give me some information as far as where we were, because I think we were looking and saying, okay, if there's 200,000 acre feet delivered less to users as of, or 188,000 as of July 1st, how much more has been transferred? And I think the numbers you're showing here is basically 55,000 plus 55,000 is going to be a more required for the full year, correct?
Correct.
Which is 100 plus or minus 120,000. Then if we overused 150,000 last year, we need to be 270,000 acre feet less delivered to users in order to get us to zero.
I think it was 242.
Is that right?
Yeah, but you can't compare the numbers exactly like that. I'm not exactly sure how Merlin comes up with his delivered to users number. That's an internal tracking mechanism that doesn't have necessarily, and I'm not sure where he measures from, the losses back to the river, the return flow credits. So I think you can judge trends, but you're never going to get them to match exactly.
Can you read Larry's hat?
That's the difficulty I have.
Okay. Well, Tina, what we're trying to do is as a farm group out there is to sit there and take a look. We don't want to overrun in 2013, but we also don't want to underfarm. So we're trying to get the best information we can of like, where are we? And can we, you know, to me it looks like we should run a pro forma spreadsheet and say, okay, a year ago, in the last 6 months, we had this much acreage fallowed, this much water fallowing, this transfers versus where we are now, and to show what our trend is on our own spreadsheet, not the Bureau's, to see whether or not that 28,000 acre feet is a realistic number. Because they're just looking for our own delivered to users, it looks like we're not going to be 28,000 acre feet over. But can we run those numbers?
Well, we can try, but I'm not sure it's going to get you any closer to what you're asking for. The Bureau's projection is, and this is a discrepancy in how things are characterized. The Bureau's number on their website is really not an end-of-year projection. It's a use-to-date comparison of what was allocated by month versus what was used by month, and then it's subject to adjustment. So when you see on the Bureau's projection, the number here for today is an overrun projection of 28,443. That's really not what they're saying on December 31st we think you'll be. They're saying from January 1st through today, based on the measurements we have and subject to subsequent true-ups, you have used 28,443 acre-feet more than you were allotted in your monthly schedule. So I can bring those monthly schedules and show you how the Bureau does that. They do some tweaking that I don't have access to right now because we don't have an approved order yet for this year. And we can see how that comparison looks, and maybe that would help.
Okay. So if that's the case and we stay on trend with that, we anticipate a 56,000 acre foot total year overrun? If they're accurate at 28,000 in the first 6 months,
If you trend the same, you could say that. But your cropping patterns have changed. The acreage will change because the fallowing program has a larger acreage in the second half of the year.
Where you're at.
So that's the difficulty. It's not exactly prorated that way. We also budget according. The monthly breakdown for the Bureau water order that operations sends in is based on historical averages. I don't know if it's a 3-year average or a 5-year average. So January has 5%. I think I've showed you the WCAB this at a past board meeting. If your cropping patterns have changed or your weather patterns have changed, that can skew things as well. And the difficulty becomes for a projection of 28,000 acre feet overrun, that's 1%. You really can't measure that accurate. So we're within the margins right now of how much better can we actually get.
Okay. Well,
she's got it wrong.
Anyway, hopefully we can get as good a numbers as we possibly can in a format that we can understand. And I thought was this the final number for 2011? The 93,190 was the final number, and the 148 is now final also.
Those are end of year numbers, and then line below that shows a credit from excess conservation.
Right,
so they balance that. So what I can do is, I know Al had asked me this question, I will request a copy of what the Bureau's using in their current schedule just to see how their proration differs from ours. And then we can see, I mean, there's so many variables, it's really hard to just put them side by side and be able to make that determination, but we can give it a shot.
We do not expect that we'll end the year at 56,000. We're apportioning water in order to avoid an overrun. And my understanding is that the fallowing that began July 1 ought to provide some relief that we can see here in the summer. So, but we will try to bring, if we have to, we'll put on a workshop and bring Merlin in here and try and reconcile it against what you're seeing every day on the Bureau website.
But you'll never reconcile exactly the accounting
I
and
understand
operational.
that the precision that we're asking for is
But we have some monthly totals. If we just look at 12 blocks and kind of assume an average over time, we can assume going forward, right?
Yeah, Tina, I've got a question. Jim Abadi. The entitlement, how did they come up with 2.632?
My phrasing, that's what's left for this year. It's not, that's all you.
Well, I came up with 2.664 because you don't know what the additional conserved water or the consumptive use is, right?
Okay, so that last line that has the asterisk next to it, 0 to 25,000 acre feet, we put in a intentionally created surplus placeholder for up to 25,000 acre feet every year. That's the maximum amount that's able to us to access. We do that because if we have extra conservation, we don't want to lose it. And to the extent that we overconserve, we have additional fallowing, that provision keeps us from losing that water.
So if it's 0, we can actually be only 3,000.
If it's 0, then it's 0. And you'll see when we had the additional conservation, last year was 14,299. That's the value up at the top. So it's in out water at that point.
All right, in 2012, we put,
So your overrun of 28,000, the projection, there's a 25,000 acre foot buffer in there. If we don't do any extra conservation, then you have a 3,000 acre foot overrun projection right
okay,
now.
in 2012 to San Diego, we upped that to make up for the 2011 shortage.
That was conservation that was created in calendar year 2012 for 2011 obligations. So the water wasn't physically conserved until the 2012 calendar year, even though it was budgeted in 2011. So they just rolled it forward. We got a credit on our consumptive use in 2011, and then it rolled forward into 2012.
Now, do we have to make up mitigation water? For 2012, 2011, we need to put 85,000 acre feet of water in.
So I'll get to that next.
So one final question, see if I can get this. If we were 100, let's say we were 200,000 acre feet to July 1st, less delivered to users. If we stay on that trend, we would anticipate we would be 400,000 acre feet less delivered to users by the end of the year if our second 6 months is the same as our first 6 months? Okay, so if we come in 400,000 acre feet less to users, and you've got the 65-55, which is 130, and we were 150,000 acre, that would be 280,000 acre feet. I would think that would show us somewhere close to 100,000 acre foot underrun.
All things being equal.
Yes, all things being equal. Yeah? Okay. Those 16 years of Brawley High School are paying off.
It's not intuitive, trust me. The other thing is when we put our annual order in, we don't know what our following commitments are for the following year because we haven't contracted for them. So we put in an annual placeholder, and then this year we'll see that the first half calendar year is going to be smaller than the second half. So all things being even, and then Kevin, as you mentioned, that's also assuming there isn't more acreage farmed elsewhere. And that's the problem, is you can't control your variables.
I'm gonna take you to coffee shops with me.
Really difficult to get the numbers to work. And they don't always work, trust me. Sometimes you have to back into them a little. I'm going to move on. This bar chart's the same as the last one. We just added the 2013 to again show magnitude of comparison. 2013 is a significantly larger conservation commitment year than 2012. Jimmy, talking to your issue, in 2010, IID took action to deliver some of its entitlement water in that year to the Salton Sea to meet the mitigation obligations of 2011 and half of 2012. That was not well received, both in Valley and out Valley, depending on your perspective, and we received quite the firestorm of opposition from other basin states and water users to that action. On the plus side, it saved IID approximately $6.3 million of mitigation expenses associated with the fallowing that we did not bill the JPA for. But again, it was a controversial action in more ways than one. On May 3rd of this year, we received a letter from the Bureau of Reclamation requesting a set of credible actions and a schedule to make the river whole, and asked IID to respond by June 30th. So we did respond on June 28th of this year with a 4-page letter that's included in your board package. That letter essentially reserved the legal positions that the district had asserted previously and said that we will agree to push that water forward and offset that reduction in river elevations given the hydrology and the other conversations that we're wanting to have with the Bureau and Basin States on the Salton Sea, and that we could replace that water in 15 and 16 through the fallowing that we had previously done in years past according to the schedules. So that's the gist of the letter exchange that occurred regarding that action. So essentially it's going back to the old schedule and redoing the fallowing that wasn't done for that same amount of water. This is a graph that shows, and this is another complexity issue, the delivery was 46,000 acre feet, even though the mitigation components were larger that year had you fallowed, because you have to mitigate the mitigation. So if in 2015 and 16, we live up to the commitment that we conceptualized in the letter, there would be additional fallowing of approximately 69,000 acre feet. 46,000 acre feet of that water is already in the sea, so you would not deliver that water, but you would have a subsequent delivery in order to get you back on the original schedule. So this is just, again, placeholder numbers for 2015 and 2016 for that fallowing to occur to offset the action. The Bureau did respond. We have a July 3rd letter, and we can make that available if you haven't received it.
How do you know that water was not conserved
I lived in it.
back in 2010?
The commitment, according to the Colorado River Water Delivery Agreement schedule, was a fallowing commitment, and we did not contractually issue fallowing contracts for that volume of water.
Is that the only way to deliver water to the sea for mitigation, is through fallowing?
Yes.
Mexico.
The salt and sea mitigation is all fallowing because it's the minimal impact.
No, we don't believe it is the only way. We believe that what we did qualified as mitigation.
Right, if you're going to the schedule that's in the Colorado
That's right.
River Delivery Agreement.
That's right.
Well, also, I believe a lot of farmers out there did their own part and conserved that water.
That's come up as well. Can you go back retroactively and somehow make good on the water we released through the efforts of water users?
Well, I believe there was a lot of line ditches done, leveling, other things like that.
The difference between the fallowing and the conservation is if you were to create the water from those types of conservation, you're essentially conserving the water out of the sea that you're mitigating. So it's a different relationship of impacts. So that's why it's fallowing.
But we were 200,000 acre feet under that year?
So again, the district does not necessarily think that its legal position for making that decision and its right to put that water in the sea is something that should require it to pay it back. But in an effort to move forward on this issue, we've reserved our right. The letter clearly reserves our legal position. The Bureau's letter acknowledges that. And it may be something in the future that becomes a priority for the district as far as meeting salt and sea commitments and restoration objectives. But for purposes of this action, that was the communication.
If we're going to pay them back, is it going to come to this board for a vote?
That would be, yes.
They're probably not getting paid back then.
That's the risk.
I'm guessing it's getting real close to not to.
That's the risk. That's the risk that the river runs.
In 15 and 16, if this conservation occurs, we will then rebill the JPA for the $6.3 million that we didn't bill them for back in 2003 as well. So that reimbursement would basically put you back on the old schedule. All I've done on this graph is added one more year. I've not gotten to the 15-16 yet, but again, it's just showing the magnitude because of the payback year. So that's not in your schedule. We just added that this morning. But again, it's going to show magnitudes of ramp up. I think that's all I have.
I can't see that.
Purple is payback fallowing.
Oh, okay.
Efficiency ramping up in 2014.
Where's the on-farm? Or you don't count for it that way?
I'd have to look, spend more time looking. It's in there somewhere.
Well, this is all the more reasons for the whale pods.
Tina, I got a quick question. That 46,000 acre feet of water, do we receive any money for that?
Steph needs to bring us.
The 46,000 acre feet, the JPA was billed $20 an acre foot, a delivery fee.
Yeah.
Oh, same thing as the farm.
Right. So, and they were put on notice. The billing statements had a little asterisk that says if we have to conserve for this water, we're going to go back and bill you the cost savings that the delivery was anticipated to create. So we'll put them on notice too that should that fallowing occur in 15 and 16, they'll get a supplemental bill.
I think we should just do it.
Any other questions?
Where do we stand on our current fallowing requirements for 2013 if you're conserving 250,000 acre feet? Have we booked everything we need to
I don't
for
know
this
the
year?
exact numbers from, they're still finalizing, they've locked the gates, and we're still working on some breach adjustments. But my understanding is based on the contracts issued, we fully met our 2013 obligations, including transfer, including payback.
And then how about 2014? Are we a quarter of the way, or?
It depends on if you have mid-year to mid-year fallowing programs, if you implement a new calendar year farm unit style fallowing. So we have a long ways to go. 2014 is a really big year, you can see from this.
Significant work to do in 2014.
Yeah, 2014, the commitments in total are close to 400,000.
And what's our typical timeline for kicking off the end of the year or January 1 fallowing? Do we start yesterday?
We basically got the summer, so.
Okay.
Normally start in the fall for a July fallowing program. So
when I was
now.
renewing a lot of leases for July, or all of one lease, I guess, but they wanted to know if the fallowing program was going to happen because they weren't going to renew a lease, and I explained to them, I don't know.
A normal time frame for fallowing applications would be September, October. So if we're going to do a calendar year program, we need to start now.
But we're shifting towards a tenant fallowing approach, or
we expect to.
Farm unit fallowing, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And a calendar year fallowing program, your target goal for fallowing is smaller than a mid-year to mid-year because you're always getting half of the next year's. It all ends up in the same, but it wouldn't seem like quite so much.
Where does the river stand right now as far as, I know they're not getting the rains they wanted up till this point. Is everyone changing focus on the river? Is the basin study the big talk right now? Or?
I think the basin study is the big talk. The hydrology is not good. As I mentioned in my last presentation, there is about a 50-50, 45-55, or 55-45 probability of a lower than an 8.23 release next calendar year. So that's the water released from Lake Powell into Lake Mead. That would be, if it had a lower release, about 750,000 acre-feet less for the lower basin, which is about a 4 to 8 foot further drop in Lake Mead's elevations from previous predictions. So that August 1st study won't come out for a couple more weeks. I'm going to be on a phone call where they notify the states of what the actual number is prior to making that more public. So as soon as we find that out, we'll let you know. But it's just flipping back and forth between an 8.23 or the reduced volume. If it's reduced, it'll be the first time since the filling of Mead that they've seen a reduced volume. So it doesn't bode well, and there's a lot of chatter going down. The hydrology is not good. I think it's going to be the third worst year on record. So we need rain, we need snowpack, and we need it to happen at the right time of year.
Is there any talk at these meetings of consideration of power production at Lake Mead? You know, we know they release water at different times for generation. Is that going to go by the wayside and the water be released just as needed and powered fins?
Well, they won't release water for power production, but they may schedule around power production. So a lot of it depends on the release schedules. I know there's some talk now, there's some environmental water that Mexico's trying to schedule and seeing how that's affecting the power production. So they try to maximize it, but they won't release solely for that purpose. But it is a consideration, particularly for the upper basin.
Anything else for Tina? Tina, thank you for the accounting and the efforts, and we'll be reviewing these numbers and methodologies in the very near future. Moving on to information item 12, Water Department General Matters. Mr. Villion.
Thank you, President Desert and Board of Directors. Mr. Silva's on vacation this week. He'll be back next week. Just a couple of items. Year-end projection or to-date water use projection and the status of our EDP program. As Tina mentioned, to date we're at about 28,443,000 acre-feet over our to-date approved order. That's 1.1% of our approved order Comparing this to Met, their approved order is 566,000. They are below or at their approved order. Likewise, Coachella on their 361,000 approved diversion. They are 12,884 below, about 3.5% below. So we're a little bit different, although the 1%, well within the measurement error, well within the loss error in the river and in the All-American Canal. As far as the apportionment program, the Water Conservation Committee did meet as a Agricultural Water Committee last week. They reviewed the available transferable water that's been either rejected or reallocated from some double accounted feedlot dairy fish farm accounts. They have decided to wait till after July 20th to wait for about the 60-day period after the initial mailing of the apportionment program forms to the water users. So they'll meet on the 23rd to review and approve the transfer requests. And that's all I have for right now.
Carlos, is that deadline the 20th, just so we can get the word out to the farm community to get the apportionment in?
That's correct. We also did include in the billing a notice of that every month on the 20th we will be requesting up to that date any transfer request or offer request so that we can process them through the Agricultural Water Committee.
And then how much water has been apportioned, or what percent of the farm accounts do you think you've received to date?
We've received about 500 apportionment forms. That's about 10%. But they are picking up. People have been working with division, and we expect to have quite a few of them in the next few days.
And then how about water rejected or
Only
returned?
about 2,500 acre-feet of water has been rejected in the 500 or so forms that have been processed.
Any other questions for Mr. Villion?
I think there is a water conservation or advisory board meeting this week. Is that right? On Thursday?
On the 16th? Oh,
Thursday or Wednesday?
WCAB.
Thursday.
WCAB, yes.
WCAB.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you.
Next up, information item 13, Energy Department General Matters. Mr. Stills.
Yes, Mr. President. We did attend the ECAC meeting, their last meeting for July. They did vote to suspend their August meeting, so the next ECAC meeting will be in September. And also, last week I rolled out a major reorg of the Energy Department. We categorize the Energy Department in three main areas: critical business headed by Jamie Asbury, engineering and operations headed by Tom King, and financial headed by Belen Valenzuela. So that reorg has been rolled out. There are still some logistical issues that we're working on to be completed, but Energy staff and HR are diligently working on it. We also sent out a performance contract to developers for the backfeed and station service performa contract and seeking the developers' comments on that. The main comment we got back was the basis for the $67 markup. They really don't like that. So we've asked the CFO to take a look at that, and he is doing a analysis of that to get back to the developers as to that more finite detail for the basis of that. And then the third issue is I traveled to Reno last week, and I spoke at the Geothermal Energy Association concerning the Salton Sea Initiative. It was really well received. I equate it to running into a Charger locker room and yelling, "I hate the Raiders," but anyway, it was really well received. And I've been invited to their board meeting later this month in San Francisco to further talk about that. Steve Ponder, the head of the Geothermal Resource Council, the GRC, wants to schedule a meeting coming down here to see how the GRC can support the initiative. And then I received an email from Steve Hansen of the Department of Energy, and he's also expressed interest in supporting the initiative. So the message was well received out there. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. Stills?
Carl, I have a question. When was the last cost of service study done? Is that an ongoing thing we do, looking at our rate structure?
I think Greg can answer that.
I believe it was in 2009, a consultant was in to do the last cost of service study. And we're going to update it internally using 2012 numbers.
Okay. And do we have a policy on how often that should be done?
I don't believe we do.
Anything else for Carl? Thank you, Carl. Information item 14, review of changes to the air conditioner rebate program, page 106 of the agenda. And presenting is Sabrina Barber.
Hi, Sabrina, back again. This time with an information item. I will try to be brief. Hopefully we get through this one a little bit quicker. As you know, residential peak demand is comprised primarily of air conditioning load. The district offers incentives to encourage the quality installation of high efficiency air conditioning units. Upon review, staff has noticed low installation rates of 16 SEER or greater air conditioning in an effort to help or assist customers in moving beyond initial cost considerations. Staff has proposed a third-tier air conditioning rebates for both central and heat pump split unit air conditioning systems. Energy Management and Strategic Marketing section has set an internal threshold of 60 cents per kilowatt hour with the intention of with the approach to bring any programs or measures that exceed that threshold before the ECAC and the Board of Directors for review and approval. Additionally, we intend on future programs or new programs prior to implementation involving the stakeholders through a stakeholder meeting or workshop process to ascertain their feedback and incorporate that as well into the implementation of new programs. Here you see the third tier for the air conditioning rebate at $500, and that would be for all units 16 SEER and greater. That's in addition to the tier 1 and 2 tier rebates currently at $100 for the first tier of 14.5 SEER and greater, and a higher incentive of $145 per ton for 15 SEER. The reason that there is a substantial jump in the incentive amount for 16 SEER is because we have noticed that with the higher SEER rating of the unit, there's a significant cost jump between the 15 SEER and the 16 and greater. So in order to encourage our customers to make the investment in the high SEER, we've set the incentive considerably higher. This was presented to the ECAC along with the attic insulation measure, and they have recommended approval, or recommend that the board approve the third tier incentive, but they've also requested that we take a look at the existing incentive levels for tier 1 and tier 2 to determine whether we need to modify those as well, possibly increase the value of those incentives for customers that may not be able to install a 16 SEER, but would still like to install an energy efficient unit, but just can't afford to make the jump from the regular 13 SEER. So we have committed to evaluating our current all the measures within our energy reward and bringing it back to the committee possibly in September for their feedback. This is just the E3 simulation for our cost effectiveness. As you can see, the early retirement, what that means is if the unit has not exceeded its useful life, we can claim it as early retirement and claim higher energy savings of 570 kilowatt hours. These are estimated savings again, which equates to $1 per kilowatt of 88 cents. And the TRC exceeds the requirement of the one. And our natural replacement, which means it's gone beyond its useful life, the energy savings are slightly lower at 381, and the $1 per kilowatt jumps to $1.31. And this is where I indicated it's very similar to the attic insulation in that the savings for attic insulation with existing insulation already installed is 387, whereas the natural replacement is 381. So it's very comparable. The dollars per kilowatt for the attic insulation being installed with existing equates to roughly $1.55 per kilowatt hour, and the natural replacement being $1.31. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. This here is, again, the same slide that was presented in the attic insulation that includes the budget. The budget for this is considerably lower just because the cost of the units are considerably higher, and we don't see as much participation. However, we do want to offer an incentive or a rebate for those customers who may be interested.
Yep. Thank you, Sabrina. If we could just go over that third tier category for the HVAC.
Yes.
And the $500 per ton. Now, are we talking about a single family house dwelling that would be benefiting from this program? Are we talking about apartments? What are we talking about there?
These are primarily for single family homes. It could go into an air conditioning unit or a multifamily. Typically, we don't see that just because of the cost. The landlords don't usually invest in that high of a SEER. But
so are these window units, or are they?
No, these are actual standalone. They could be split unit or packaged, but they're not wall units. They're not room air conditioners.
And in the past, I know the air conditioning program had a higher financial incentive, and then it was corrected a few years ago.
This is loosely based on the AC trade-up that we offered several years ago. The difference is those required also the installation of the 16 SEER high efficiency units, but it was targeting specifically 10 SEER or below. We've eliminated that requirement and are just offering the straight $500 regardless of.
So this is a cleaner, easier understood type of a program where optimistically we'll be able to have additional applications and participation. Any idea on what kind of dollars values we're looking at that this could enhance our public benefits program?
The impact we don't foresee going over $100,000, at least for 2013, because we're halfway through the year. But we will be doing some marketing specific to the energy rewards once we finalize the program changes.
And so this program, the recommendation here came out of staff is designing it, but also the ECAC meeting, they had participation there?
That's correct.
And then we have a couple of ECAC members here in the audience. Johnny and Jerry, do you guys have any input or comments about the air conditioning program?
John Hernandez, 514J, ECAC member. The comment that I had on this, first of all, on the other slide, there's something about the radiant barriers. Did that go anywhere? Is that still in talks? Has it been implemented?
That's being approved.
That's already came before the board?
No, it didn't. No, that one hasn't come before the board because it was 18 cents. And since it doesn't hit that internal threshold, we went ahead and implemented it.
Okay, that clears that question up.
What was that, please, for my benefit? No, not Sabrina, but John, what
the
was
radiant barrier?
Oh, okay. I apologize.
What is that? Is that the air fan?
Yeah.
Radiant barrier is a form of attic insulation. It's most of the newer homes have it now. It almost looks like foil cardboard that they will put on the rafters rather than the batt insulation or blowing in the cellulose. It's essentially another form, but there's two different types. It can either be attached to the rafters, or you can opt to have it installed prior to the roofing being laid down, or in the event you re-roof, you can install that first. It prevents the heat from entering the building or the structure.
So that was a concern you had, John?
Well, that was a concern I had because I noticed on the previous slide that the amount of money that was allocated for the radiant barriers was significantly larger than for some of the other programs that we had already implemented that we weren't fully utilizing. So I was just wondering what was going on there, but I'm still not clear. On this particular item, on the 14, 15, 16 SEER, it's my understanding that most of your average consumer can only afford the 14 or the 15 because of the cost. So to me, to see a higher priced item getting the higher incentive, well, yeah, that sounds good. But what about your average ratepayer? Why can't they get a little higher incentive also? And if we have money available in the public benefits programs and it's significantly doubled, the 500 over the 100 of the 145, well, my feeling is that we're going to recommend 500 for a 16 SEER that's a higher priced item that can be afforded by people that drive the Cadillacs and the higher priced vehicles. Then the ones that drive the the Toyotas and the Nissans should be able to get a break too. And I would only hope that you approve the whole thing as one package and double the 100 and double the 145, and yeah, keep it at 500. But how about being a little bit fair to the average ratepayer? That was my.
And that's a very good point, John. What and maybe you or Sabrina can answer if you're looking at replacing your unit before it dies, a unit that say maybe is 12, I think the average life is 12 to 15 years, depending on the size of the unit and how much it's used and so on. What is the price of a unit in relationship to what a customer stands to get in rebate? Isn't a unit several $1,000s, like $3,000-$4,000?
More like $5.
More like $5, and so you're going to get $500 for it?
It's per ton.
Per ton. Okay, so if you get a 4-ton, that'd be $2,000. Is that what we're looking at?
I think that's the way the math adds up.
And what you're saying is, if you get a smaller unit, you should also have a significant incentive, perhaps not the 500, but as close to as possible.
That would that sounds fair to your average ratepayer to get at least close to or similar to incentives that someone that can afford the higher price item is getting.
Okay. Well, that definitely.
Because I would imagine, and I'm not an air conditioning person, but I do pay close attention to my power bill now, and if my air conditioner is not broke, I'm not going to buy a new one, especially when it's going to cost me $5,000, and then you're talking about the installation, and then you usually have to do some remodeling in order to get the new installation done. So you're looking at somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000.
Problem is, when they die, and they usually die on Friday in the middle of June. Okay.
Right, and my understanding is that if it's done within the year,
I know very well.
Then you can get the rebate backdated. Absolutely. If it's done within the year. That's what the question that I think Sabrina answered for me. That if someone purchases the item, that they can go back if the budget's still there. There's money available. It's within the year. Then you can get that. So,
and I think it merits to mention that this may not be an item upon replacement that you just go and buy at the store. You either have to borrow at a high interest rate if you absolutely have to have it. But I don't know how many people can fork over $2,500 plus tax right off the bat in order to replace an air conditioner that may or may not need to be replaced.
Well, we're writing off $2 million in unpaid electrical bills, so just think about it that way.
If I may,
yes,
Director Galindo, I would just, as a suggestion, I would like this perhaps take them back to ECAC and let them take a look at it. And for me, I'm speaking as one, I truly do agree with John's assessment on this, that I think the lower end should be getting a little more. It's just.
And we did commit to the committee at July's first meeting that we would reevaluate the incentive levels for the prior tier and intend to take it back to the ECAC.
Okay, well, how's this? Only a suggestion. I would prefer it go back, but you guys can.
I think it should go back, and I think, John, if I may suggest, is that when you make your recommendations, just outline them so that they can come to the board and we can follow them. I mean, you're the consumers. You know what it is that's needed out there, and we would like to follow in as much as we can, and in as much as we have the money, and the money's there. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you.
Very kind.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, our final information item today, and the final item of the day is item 15, discussion of transmission service agreements with Orny 18 LLC.
President Desert, I'm going to have to excuse myself on this one.
Oh, must be sitting on some fencing ground, huh?
Good afternoon, Directors. Jamie Asbury from IID Energy Department. I'm bringing forth this afternoon as an information item a transmission service agreement between IID and Orny 18, which is a subsidiary of Ormat, for 30 megawatts of firm transmission service across the IID system for delivery into the Edison system at Mirage. Ormat submitted a transmission service agreement several years ago. IID did not at that time have sufficient capacity to serve the request. We have, as the board's aware, signed a PPA with an existing generator on the IID system who was previously taking service across the path, and they relinquished that capacity back to IID, which allows us to serve Ormat long-term firm. Under the provisions of IID's tariff, if you'll notice, this agreement is only 1 year in length. The term of the agreement is officially 1 year, but under the provisions of IID's open access transmission tariff, long-term is any agreement that's 1 year or more. Short-term is anything under 1 year. The level of revenue that IID would receive from this for the 30 megawatts of capacity is in the $600,000 range for that 1 year term. And absent any issues, we'll be bringing it back to the board for approval at the next regularly scheduled meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is this the same rate as the other geothermals are paying?
It's the traditional standard offer transmission service charge of $1.69 a kilowatt month.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jamie? Thank you, Jamie. We look forward to seeing you bringing this back. Oh, that's it. That's it for today. We'll close the meeting at 10 till 4.